Hello guys, this is my Dutch 1895 number 4 carbine that I made a video of when I unboxed it from Empire Arms. Really neat little rifle. You cannot buy ammo for this gun, let alone brass. There may be a couple really small ammo companies that you may be able to buy some from, but none of the big companies make it. So you're pretty much stuck with converting brass yourself and reloading for it. And it's a little bit of a process. I have never done such a conversion before, really. So it was a learning experience for me. I'm going to go over how I did it, some of the issues I found, some of the things to be wary of, and show you how it turned out for me because I finally got a chance to go shoot it. So I'm going to move this stuff out of the way and get some of the brass and dies out. I really don't have a good way to film over at my press, so I'm not going to actually film me loading it, but I'm going to show you the dies and discuss how I did it. So let's get this out of the way. Okay, first off is load data and instructions. There really isn't going to be anything in any of your normal loading manuals for this cartridge. And so what I did was I found some forum posts where people told me that this hand loader magazine issue has an article on it. And so this is February 93, number 161. And that's where I found this article that has some instructions on how to convert the 303 British brass. And it has some actual load data and cartridge dimensions and all that. And so that's what I started with on this, and it worked pretty well. RCBS used to make a conversion set of dies for this caliber, and I don't think you can even get them to custom make it anymore. I may be wrong. You could try to contact them and see, but for me, what I did was I went to CH Tool and Die, and they make some really nice stuff. And that is where I got mine. So right here is the first box of dies that I got from them. And this has 2 forming dies and a file trim die. This is for my Lee turret press, which comes in really handy when you're doing a conversion like this. So you can just index to the next die that you need. So there is a Form 1, a Form 2, and then a file trim die, which I had never used one of these before, but they work well. It's just what it sounds like. The neck goes up through here, and you use a file to trim it down. Whenever you size your 303 British here with these 2 dies, you're going to have a good bit sticking out at the neck. And so what I did was used a small hacksaw and cut the majority of it off, and then I got my files out and filed it smooth. And that seemed to work pretty well. And then in the other box, you're going to have a neck sizing die and a bullet seating die. Now, when I called CH Tool and Die about a year ago, maybe 10 months ago, they were out of the full-size resizing die. And I have one on back order, but it still hasn't come yet. They're busy, and I'm sure it takes a long time to tool up and make these dies, but they'll get a hold of me eventually. But I really haven't needed it yet. So these dies are very expensive, so if you're going to be doing this and you don't want to spend a bunch of money, then you need to go to the other videos where guys use dies from other cartridges, and I'll try to remember to put their names, channel names down in the description so you can go check those out if you want to. I don't blame anyone for wanting to do that because this was, I think I spent nearly $300 on all these dies, and that's a lot of money. But they're very well made, and they don't make a ton of them, so, that's why costs go up on something like that. It's a custom deal. Not many people have these guns. So I'm going to get some brass out here, just a second. Okay, as I mentioned before, you're going to be converting 303 British brass. to make this. You're gonna be kind of limited in your options unless you want to do some extra work on which brands of brass you buy. PPU is readily available and pretty easy to find, but the problem is this right here. The dimensions on PPU brass is different, and it will not chamber unless you remove some material down here. I know the Koba has a video on this, and he chucks his in a lathe and removes a little bit of material down here at the base to get his to work. I don't have a lathe, and so what I did was hunt down Remington brass. I've heard that Remington and Winchester brass are both good to go, but PPU is definitely not. I bought these dummy rounds off of eBay. It's PPU brass, and the guy seems to have sized the brass right, but he didn't remove any material down here, and so as you saw, you can't even close the bolt on this. So you're going to be hunting down, say, Remington or Federal brass. I went with Remington. And one thing you want to be cautious of is if you're going to buy once fired brass or unknown range pickup brass, you need to worry about head separation. And I don't know how well this is showing up on the camera, but you'll see this line down here. That tells me that this brass was fired out of a surplus Enfield rifle, which are known for having very generous chambers, and you will get a lot of stretching and have to worry about your head separating down here right along that line. I'm hoping that shows up good. So what you want to do is, if you're going to be loading jacketed rounds, I would not use once fired 303 British brass unless you very, very closely inspect it and make sure that that head isn't about to go. For me, what I did was I only use the once fired 303 brass for light cast loads only, and that worked out fine for me. But I did go through, and this one right here, I'm not going to use it. That's just, it's about to go. Well, it'd be fine to use in an Enfield, and you could probably get, you know, 1 or 2 more firings out of it, but I just didn't want to risk it. So one thing you want to do is get a paper clip or something like that and inspect all of these down here. And if it's about to go down there at the head, then you'll be able to feel a little ridge down in there with your little paper clip. So just make sure, if you're using the once fired brass, inspect it really closely and be careful there. Now, as far as more higher powered jacketed loads, I looked around and I didn't see anybody that had Remington 303 British new brass in stock at the moment. So I looked on Gunbroker, and there is a guy that was selling this already converted 6.5 Dutch brass, and so I bought some of that. I don't know how he converted his, whether he used, you know, dies for other cartridges, or if he bought this CH tool and die, or maybe has an old RCBS set. But he did a really good job, and this is nice brass. He annealed it. That's an important part on this, because you're really working the brass hard when you do this. So I used this stuff in my jacketed rounds, and it turned out really well. No issues there. The last time I looked, he didn't have any for sale on there, so you'll just have to check it out. I think there's a couple companies that sell converted 303 British brass for this cartridge, and it's very expensive, just insanely expensive. And so is the ammo, if you can find some loaded up. I just got 40 of them. I forget how much it was. I really don't remember it. It wasn't cheap, I'll tell you that. So what I did was Just take a regular 303 British here. These are some of the ones fired. I lubed it down really good with Imperial sizing dye wax. This is really good stuff. Dirty. But you don't want to use too much or you're going to get dents in here from too much lube. So you lube it up really good. Run it up through the first form dye. Make sure that there's still plenty of lube on it in between steps. Run it up through the second dye. Then put it up into your trim dye and cut off the excess. Now this is a piece I found on the floor from what I cut off on here. So that's about how much is going to stick up out of there. And that's going to take you a long time if you're just sitting there filing on it. So I would suggest some kind of a saw to cut that with. It'll save you time. And then trim it flat with your file, and then chamfer and deburr it. And then after that, you could anneal it at that point, because you're done working the brass real hard at that point. If you have a full-size sizing die, you may want to run it through that and then anneal it. I don't have that die, but I also found that I don't need it. The first two forming dies get it close enough, you know, and I didn't have any issues with it without having that full length sizing die. So after that, I ran it up through the neck sizing die, got my neck good. Now some of these, you're going to end up with really thick brass at your neck, and some guns are not going to like that. Just depends on how your chamber was cut and all that. So you may want to ream the neck and cut down on a little bit of that. I took my after I fired these reloads that I put together, I took a reamer to them after firing, and it shaved off a little bit, but not a whole lot. So I don't think I had too thick of necks on any of these. Not enough to worry about. So as far as the loads that I shot, I went with cast loads and jacketed loads. Here are a couple of dummy rounds I worked up with the 2 bullets that I used. Now the first one, I used the NOE 136 grain. It's a 270 mold, and I sized them down to 265 with a gas check. And then I powder coated them over the gas check. I used, 12.8 grains of 2400 at 2.882 inches. And I shot this at 50 yards. I think this was a 8-inch target here. And man, I'm really happy with that result. That's 5 shots. It was raining. You can probably see all the rain there from this picture of my target. I'm not a great shot anyway. My eyes aren't great for iron sights, so that's pretty good. I mean, that's maybe a 1.5 to 2 inch group at 50 yards. There were no high pressure signs on the brass when I was done. They looked really good. They sealed the chamber really well. There wasn't a bunch of soot all over the brass. So the load was really nice. I did not chronograph them. I forgot to bring it that day. I'll have to do that next time, but honestly, I'm not really concerned what the velocity was since it shot well. It didn't lead the barrel. There wasn't any pressure signs. So really happy with that cast load that I worked up. And since I was using the once fired brass on these cast loads, I inspected the head down here really well after I shot them, and there wasn't any issues with head separation getting any worse. Like I said, I culled out the ones that really looked ugly, and so, you know, some of them that I just bought like 100 random range brass that was all Remington. but I have no idea what guns they were fired in. Some of them definitely were fired in guns with a nice chamber, not excessive. And then some of them, like this one, was definitely fired in a gun with a pretty generous chamber. So I put those aside. Maybe I'll use those for cast loads in the infield or something. The next load that I fired was a jacketed bullet. And it's a Hornady 264 interlock. It's a round nose design with a little bit of a soft point there. And these shot great. That's an even better group. 5 shots again, 50 yards. Really happy with that. I mean, that's about as good as I can do, especially with the way my back is. Hunching over at the bench is kind of tough for me, and so I'm not the most steady person. Really happy with these, and I used the brass that was already converted by a guy on Gunbroker, and no pressure signs. It all looked great after firing. They weren't overpressured, they weren't real hot, and what I used on those was 33 grains of 4064. I use 4064 in most of my jacketed loads for surplus rifles, and I have a lot of luck with it. I got that load data out of this magazine, as I said, and they had 4064 down here with 33 as a starting load, and that's what I went with. Turned out really nice. The rifle is just really fun to shoot. It's got a nice trigger, really smooth bolt. The machine work on that gun is just awesome. I mean, that just feels like glass. It's great. I had ordered a single shot adapter for this thing, but it hadn't come in yet, and I forgot my end block clip that day, so I was having to be really careful to load those in there one at a time and not risk breaking the extractor. But I finally did get the single shot adapter in, and that's what I usually use on these rifles that take an end block, like the Carcanos. I just prefer to load them in there one at a time instead of trying to deal with the end block clip. So next up for this project, I'm gonna try 140 grain Spitzer bullets to see how they will do in there, because these Hornady bullets, the round nose ones, are a little more expensive, not as common, but you can find 6.5 140 grain for a lot cheaper. I'm gonna give those a try, see how they do. I know it likes these. Not sure how it's gonna do with those smaller, shorter bullets with the spire point. And then I have another mold from NOE. It's 165 grain 270. I bought it for the Carcanos because I've been trying to get those. I have several of the carbine size Carcanos, and I've been trying to get those to shoot well, and no bullets that I've tried so far that thing has liked, except maybe those discontinued Hornady bullets that are this style, but they're 267, I think they were. And I have some of those left, but they don't make them anymore, so I really kind of want to save them. So I gotta cast some of these up though. I don't have any yet. It's a similar looking bullet here, but this is the 136 and those are the 165. So next time I feel good enough to get the lead pot out and cast some up, I'm gonna do that. And then load some of those up and give it a try. I'm hoping I can get the other style jacketed bullets to work, because they're just cheaper and I have tons of them. Probably have about 300 of these here, which I like, but I just don't want to use that many of them if I can get a cheaper bullet to shoot well in it. At the moment, I can't really think of anything else that I need to talk about. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I try to answer all my comments. Just let me know if you have any questions, and if you have any suggestions also, feel free to let me know if you hear something that just sounds wrong that I'm doing. I know I can admit when I'm wrong, no problem, and I'm always down to trying new methods. So let me know, and I appreciate you guys watching.